Good morning, church. My name is Jacob. I am not the... Jeb is on a family vacation, but I wanted to extend a warm welcome to all of our visitors here this morning. We're so happy to have you. We hope that you'll stick around and let us get to know you a little bit after church. And we're just glad you're with us today. Now, David's writing, and I think we can all agree after hearing that 23rd Psalm this morning, it's always just had a place in my heart. And it's because his imagery is like vivid, like you feel it, like you're there. You can see the images in your head if you're just reading them, and that to me is always it's been special to me. But he writes with such conviction, and there's, the valleys of the shadow of death, and there's slimy pits and high mountaintops. And if you read a lot of the Psalms, you get anything and everything. But he paints a picture of what it means for him as he follows Jesus. Now, I'm going to start today by talking about a person that many of us have been. And if you have not been this person, you've seen this person, and you have pitied this person. And what I'm going to talk about is a man or a woman who has multiple small children trying to get through the airport. And I'm sure that if you have not been that person, you've seen him. And before I get started, I want to give a shout out to all my brothers and sisters in arms out there. If you have multiple kids and you've made it through the airport, I see you. I feel you. I'm with you. I support you, but I want you to picture, and I'm gonna make this as vivid as possible. I want you to picture me a few weeks ago when we went to Colorado to go see my family. Now, if you don't know, I have 3 kids under the age of 6, and I catch myself thinking back to a time when I used to fly alone, and Kimber and I describe it's like if you fly alone, you're basically like a ninja in the airport. You're like, I'll go here, I'll do this, I'll go in here, I'll get a magazine, I'll maybe get a good book. So that was a long time ago, and it is no longer that way for us now. So I think there's 2 kinds of people when it comes to packing. There's those that pack as little as possible, that try to save space here and there, pack as little as they possibly can in order to make it through the week. And then there's those that, shall we say, don't do that. We'll call those people prepared. They're prepared. Now, if you've been to Colorado, any of you that have been know that at any point in Colorado, you need to be prepared for 80-degree weather and minus 10-degree weather and snow and hail and rain and sleet and any other weather pattern. So let's just say that my wife and I are prepared, okay? So we have, I'm going to grab a few bags here. We have a couple bags. This one is, the main bag, which may hold the kids' clothes and some of Kimber's clothes. And then we have a second smaller bag, but equally as large. And then I have my duffel bag, which I love this thing. Jeb took this on his motorcycle down to California and back. And then, of course, if you have kids, this is what I'm going to call an activity bag, toy bag. And then Kimber has a diaper bag, of course, but it's not pictured here. And then I bring this, my Indiana Jones satchel. And so all of these things, actually, I need a few things out of here first. All of these things you have to get from your car to at least the checked baggage area. And some of them you get to carry all the way through the airport. And there's a few things that I've learned along the way, and I think Kimber and I have a pretty good process by now, but you parents know that if I was flying anywhere other than my mom's house, who has car seats, I would also have 2 car seats and possibly a booster. But the point is it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff, and in the way that the way that we go through it, as a parent, you gotta be creative. And Lane was actually telling me about a time before Bags had wheels, and it sounded even worse. To be honest with you, and you're gonna do this. Okay, now if you remember at Christmas, my hand was in a cast. You guys remember that? So I had like the hook. So you like get the hook on, and of course like one of your children is sitting right here. You're just trying to get to the baggage area. Like maybe like this, and you're trucking through. And of course, the weight limit is 50 pounds. So this one's 49 and a half, and this one's 49 and a half. But it doesn't look like much fun, and I'll tell you, it's not. It's not much fun, and the idea is that, and I've learned this kind of the hard way, is that your enjoyment of travel is completely dependent on how much stuff you're carrying with you. If you've been backpacking, where you have to take everything that you need for the weekend, you know that your enjoyment of the trail is directly proportional to how heavy your backpack is. And if you are an overpacker, you're not going to have a good time. But that's something that we've come to learn. The more that you have on your shoulders, the less you're going to enjoy the journey. The less you have, the more you'll appreciate the journey itself. But carrying a bunch of stuff around is not enjoyable. And so I hope everyone has their Bible. We're going to be in the 23rd Psalm, and we'll jump around a little bit after that, but we're going to start there this morning. And I want you to turn there with me, and we're going to read it together again, because even as it was read this morning, there's certain psalms that just, I could hear them again and again and again, and it matters. It's just every time something new comes out, every time I just love the language. So I actually bought this on a whim a while ago. It's the 1611 edition of the King James. That's the original publishing of the King James. And some things I just think sound good in King James, and this is one of those verses. I'm just going to go ahead and read it from that. It says, the Psalm of David. He, Lord, is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table for me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Okay. So I think David knew early on that the less we're carrying around, the better it is for us. So that's a sheep. That is a sheep. The Lord is my shepherd, I not want. We're gonna focus on the first part of this scripture here this morning, and this is the part where I want you guys to think about what animal you identify with. And I know I talked about this at a Lord's Supper once, but we talked about this in the kids class, in the teen class, and it said, of all the animals in God's kingdom, who identifies with a sheep? I don't think many of us, given a choice, would be like, yes, the sheep. Love the sheep. Because sheep don't really do anything, and can't really take care of themselves. They don't have fangs or like talons. All the stuff that you don't see very many like sports teams, like the sheep. Now Colorado State is the Rams. That's neither here nor there, but yeah, you don't see very many. It's just like a sheep, because it doesn't sound very fierce, and you also don't really see very many kids being like, oh, I just love the sheep, because they're helpless. I mean, they are helpless. What is to admire about a helpless animal? They can't clean themselves. They are helpless. They can basically do nothing. They're just a ball of fluff with legs, essentially. They're a wool sweater with feet. And And I guess that's fine, but David starts his psalm by saying, the Lord is my shepherd. And David, and if we remember, was a shepherd. So David, of all people, would know what it meant to be a shepherd. And when you call the Lord your shepherd, you're, of course, implying that this is you. You are the sheep with the grass in his mouth. I like that picture. So you're basically saying that I am a sheep. Now, David is saying that his message is that he is completely dependent on God for everything. He is dependent on God for everything. And when we don't rely on God for everything, we end up with a burden. And what that burden is our first burden of the day, our first bag of the day, if I can get these to go the right direction. And that is, wait for it, this will be magical. That is the burden of self-reliance. And that's going to be the big one, hopefully, if my thing holds. I totally tried this out this morning. Woo! Thank you. All right. The burden of self-reliance. Instead of saying, the Lord is my shepherd, we're saying, I'm my own shepherd. I know best. I will plan my life. I will plan my direction. I will pick myself up by my bootstraps. And when I fall down, I will fix it myself. I'm the master of my own destiny. I have a plan. I have my plan. I can bring in all the grocery bags from the car in one trip without asking for help. Am I right? I can do that. Does any of that sound familiar? I've had so many conversations with my brother where I tell him about this glorious plan that I had for some portion of my life. And I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Hitch, but at some point I call him back. I'm like, I saw it going differently in my head. The plan that I had didn't end up being the way that it worked out, and I couldn't understand why. And then a month later, a week later, 6 months later, a year later, I'd be like, oh, God's doing something in my life. Like, I had a plan, and God completely changed my plan. And at the time, I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Why am I so mad? And then looking back, I'm like, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. But this happens all the time. And every time it happens, I look back and it's like, oh, God's working in my life. Sometimes it's hard to see at the time, but I'm carrying around this giant gray bag, this burden of self-reliance, and I'm trying to do it myself because that's the American way. You got to do it yourself. That's a big, heavy bag. All right, so the Lord is my shepherd. I am not my own shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. I am not my own shepherd. I want you to keep saying that. While these two go hand in hand, I want to focus on the second half of this verse is that I shall not want. That sounds very simple. I shall not want. Just keep saying it. I shall not want. On day 3 of the diet, when Lane brings donuts to the office, I shall not want. When the new iPhone comes out, I shall not want. Or the new Samsung, or the new 55-inch TV. I do not want that. When the new cars roll onto the lot, I shall not want. The cars that I have mostly get me there just fine. But we live in a place and a time where all of industry is trying to create something that you see and think, I need that in my life. My life is incomplete without that thing in my life. And whether it's on TV or in a magazine or online or in your neighbor's driveway or in their living room, and you think this is the thing that's been missing from my life. If I just had that thing, everything would be great. How much better would my life be with an iPhone 7 or the BMW or a 3-car garage or that donut? How much better would my life be if I get that new job or when I'm dating someone or when I'm married or when I have kids or when I'm no longer married? How much better will my life be if we had a bigger house or one extra bedroom or another bathroom, if I had a bigger, nicer, faster, thinner, smaller, newer, fill in the blank, then my life will be complete. But if any of that sounds familiar, we carry around another burden that is directly proportional to all of those things that I just mentioned, and that is the burden of discontent, or discontentment, but that didn't fit on the sign. So discontent. And I think contentment is one of the most challenging things that we deal with. Maybe. Yes. No. Yes. Contentment is one of the most challenging things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's tougher now than it used to be, because when it used to just be you saw your neighbor's new car, now you see everybody's new car because of Facebook and social media. When it used to be that you only saw what they had in your local general store, now you have Amazon. And I don't know about you guys, but you could go down like the rabbit hole of Amazon and you just start adding stuff to your cart or your wish list, and then your spouse sees the cart and it's like, what are you doing? What is happening? And it's, I don't know if it happens to you guys, but like Facebook and a few others have these pop-up ads. Like if you've been searching for something on Amazon, like for instance, if Kimber searches for something on Amazon, it pops up on my Facebook like at work. And I'm like, what are you looking at? Like, do we need that? But all these new avenues have given us all these things that we see, and all the things that we see on just stuff you could buy or stuff that other people are doing. It basically has just made the net bigger of what we see. And there's so many avenues for these products for them to get them in your face. And you can go down the rabbit hole pretty easily. You're like, wow, I didn't even know that existed. I kind of want, no, I think I need that. No, I must have it. Whatever it is, I think this happens to us quite a bit. Now, maybe even deeper than that is that we now have example after example after example that the more you look at social media, Facebook and Instagram and whatever else, the more you look at social media, the less happy you are. That's science. Study after study after study has shown that you are less satisfied with your own life after looking at social media than you were before you started. The reasons for that are numerous, but there's a couple things at play that are important in that, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but people aren't exactly honest about their lives on social media, we'll say. People are portraying a version of their life that they want you to see on social media. One psychiatrist described it as, you are seeing other people's highlight reel of their life, and you're comparing it to your day-to-day, in the mud, in the dishes life, and it's not the same. And they said that we always compare ourselves to other people. We compare ourselves to other people and what kind of job that they may have, what kind of car they're driving, what kind of clothes they're wearing. And this is just something that we naturally do, but social media has made it a broader thing where instead of just seeing what your coworkers are driving or what the people in your church have or what your neighbors are driving, you see like what every friend you've ever had ever buys a new car, and they're like, well, look at my new car, and you're like, cool, my car is not that good. But David says, I shall not want. And we need to adopt this as a mantra to ourselves. I shall not want. I shall not want. Paul said it in Philippians 4:2. He said, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. So David tied it to the first verse. He tied not wanting to following the shepherd, to believing in the shepherd. Now, if we think back to being a sheep, The shepherd provides you with everything you need. If you need water, the shepherd leads you to water. If you need food, the shepherd leads you to a green pasture. If you need rest, we'll find out here in a few that he makes you lie down. The shepherd is in complete control of the sheep's life, and the sheep is okay with that. And so when David says, I shall not want, it's because he's following the shepherd. And that, I think, is something that we need to think about the next time we find ourselves wanting someone. Who are we following? Are we following marketers and product makers and Apple, or are we following the shepherd? Okay? There was a man who came to a preacher after the 2009 economy stock market crash, and he said, I've lost everything. I've lost my job, my house, and my car. And the preacher replied, I'm so sorry to hear that you've lost your faith. And the man says, I didn't say that. I haven't lost my faith at all. The preacher continued, I'm sorry to hear that you've lost your character. And the man said, I haven't lost my character. And the preacher continued, I'm sorry to hear that you've lost your salvation. And the man replied, I haven't lost my salvation either. And the preacher observed, and it sounds to me like you haven't lost anything. 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul says, godliness with contentment is great gain. I shall not want. Just keep saying it. I shall not want. All right. Unfortunately, I don't have time to talk about all the aspects of this psalm, so I picked my favorites. But here we go. As the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. Whenever I talk to another person with kids, and especially small kids, I feel like I'm looking in the mirror a lot of times. Their eyes look like my eyes. Our conversations are often like, did they sleep through the night? And then you see the sadness come over their face, and you're like, oh no, how many times were you up? And they're like, oh, just 2. And you're like, oh, pretty good night then. And it doesn't matter. I just feel their pain. I've been there. But for Kimber's birthday, at her request, I got her a Fitbit. And a Fitbit keeps track of your sleep. And that's like cool data. You're like, yeah, I want to know how much I slept. You don't want to know how much you've slept. If you have little kids, the first night or two, one of the first nights she wore it, she's like, do you want to hear my sleep data? I was like, no. But then she told me anyways. She's like, oh, I got 3 hours of good sleep and then 1 hour of restless sleep. And then it said I was up 5 times. And I was like, I didn't need to know that. That's not good information. Like that data is not necessary. But that's okay. I'll follow that under depressing instead of informative. But we have our third bag. Our third piece of luggage this morning is going to be weariness. Weariness, that's what it says, right? Yeah, weariness. And this was one that I think all of us in today's age carry around to some degree. I mean, who's tired in here? I can tell some of you are. But weariness, we're all tired. Whether it's physical or emotional, you may be spiritually tired. But it can become exhausting. I mean, I haven't slept in 5 years. Really slept. You may have noticed my kids were here with Dan and Tammy last week. Kimber and I were nowhere to be found because we were sleeping. We went to Seattle and spent a weekend away, and we slept. And it was nice because we were able to rest, and we were able to recharge, and we were able to get into this place for breakfast at 10:55. We sit down, and people are having burgers, and we're like, pancakes? Are you still serving breakfast? And they're like, yeah, for 5 more minutes. I'm like, pancakes, right here. And it was actually really funny. We're sitting there eating our breakfast, and sodas are going by, and sandwiches are going by, and it was glorious. We had breakfast at 11, and that's okay. In the year 1910, Americans slept 9 hours per night on average. And right now, our average is about 7 is what we're supposed to shoot for. And if we get 7, we're like, yes, did it. Check that one off. But interestingly, or depending, you may not find interest in this, but I did. There's only one other mammal that finds trouble sleeping, and it's that sheep with the grass in its mouth. I guess sheep can only sleep well if everything is perfect. If there's no predators, if there's no bugs, if they've been well fed, if they've had a drink, then a sheep can lay down and sleep. Otherwise, they're restless. And I think as we look at this verse, a few things strike me, and I put them in italics for you, is that he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. These are two things that the shepherd is taking the action here. Now, it is on us to allow ourselves a time to rest. God himself allowed a time to rest with the Sabbath, and that's important. But the active one here is God. The active one here is the shepherd saying, you need to lie down. I am going to guide you to a place where you can lie down. If we are following him and we're trusting him, he's going to take us to a place where we get rest. I want you to close your eyes for a second just while I read this. I've been doing this a lot in the teen class, just listening to the scripture. So close your eyes. It says, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. Open up your eyes. I don't know about you guys, but that makes me feel amazing. Just to hear those words. I can imagine that place where it sounds so peaceful. It sounds so quiet. It sounds amazing. And right before I took this trip with all these bags, I received as a Christmas present some noise-canceling headphones. And I was kind of excited to give them a try, because I don't know if you guys know, but children can be noisy, and airplanes can be noisy, and people on an airplane can be noisy. And so in the middle of our flight, I pulled out my noise-canceling headphones, and I put them on, and they have levels, like 1 through 10. 1 is like almost no noise canceling, 0 is obviously none, and then 10 is like the most available. So I put it on 1, I was like, click, click. I kept going up, click, 3, 4, 5, and then it's just like silence around 7 or 8 and 9 and 10. Now 10 burns a lot of batteries, but oh man, it's amazing. All I could hear was the music. And I'm holding a child, and Kimber's across the aisle, and she's talking to me, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I can't hear you. And it was absolutely amazing. You couldn't hear the engine anymore. You couldn't hear people talking. You couldn't hear my kids, other people's kids. It was unbelievable. But the world can get noisy. The world can get busy. And while I was typing this up, right at this spot, my kids were playing with the kazoos that we got them when we were over there. And so they kept on coming up right up to me and just like, I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. But the world can get like that. The world can get loud. It can get noisy. It can get distracting. And the shepherd is our noise-canceling headphones. Okay, the shepherd is the one taking us to a place where he's going to turn off all that other noise and garbage and take you to a place where you can rest. Take you to a place where you can only hear what he wants you to hear. A seminary teacher once gave these words to his students. Even beasts of burden must be turned out to grass occasionally. The very sea pauses an ebb and flood. The earth keeps the Sabbath in the wintering months. And man, even when exalted to God's ambassador, must rest or faint, must trim his lamp or let it burn low, must recruit his vigor or grow prematurely old. In the long run, we shall do more by sometimes doing less. So, carrying the burden around of weariness is a heavy bag. I want to stay on this verse to discuss another bag, and that is, twice in the 23rd Psalm, David makes reference to where he's getting his directions from. He says, first he says, he leads me beside quiet waters, and then secondly, He says, He guides me in the paths of righteousness. Certain things were more enjoyable when I was a kid than they are now. And I think one of those things is travel. And it's become obvious to me as a father that it was much more enjoyable for your parents to just grab you by the hand and put you in the car and be like, we're going on a trip. And you're like, cool, awesome. And you got to look around. You didn't have to drive. You didn't have to plan. You didn't have to book. You didn't have to buy plane tickets. You didn't have to worry about the cost of plane tickets. You were just a kid enjoying the vacation. They would set the itinerary. They would set the plans. And all you did was just go along for the ride. At some point in life, unfortunately, that changes. And you become the person that is arranging the travel. And you become the person that has to be worried about what time to get to the airport. And you become the person that has to allow for traffic on the way to the airport or some natural disaster. You have to become that planner. And that's where we kind of get our next bag, and that is worry. Now, some of us worry more than others, and that's okay. My mom is a worrier, like a crazy worrier, and it's exhausting. I don't know how she does it. Come on, you can do it. Saw this going differently in my head. Okay, worry. That's going to fall. That's all right. So some of us are worriers. My mom is a worrier. She would, when I fly, even today, as a grown man, with my family and my kids, she's like, let me know that you got to the airport okay, and let me know that you made it through security okay. And can you please text me when you land, and make sure that your bags got there. And then can you please text me when you get back to your house? I'm like, Mom, no. I was like, if you haven't heard of an airplane crashing in Idaho, we made it okay. And if I don't know. Anyways, but being a good son, I oftentimes forget some or all of those steps. Usually just most. Usually I say we landed, and she's like, well, text me when you get back to your house. I'm like, it'll be like midnight 30. But she'd be like, why didn't you tell me that you landed safely? And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. She's like, I was worried. I'm like, well, I'm busy carrying all these bags. But letting God lead you sounds simple enough. We like to make our own plans, though. And unfortunately, for the worriers out there, God doesn't particularly detail what that plan is going to be. In fact, He kind of works in the opposite way. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16, the writer says the following. Says, let us approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive and find grace to help us in our time of need. Now, that last part is important. God helps us in our time of need. He is timely. I want you guys to think about God in the same way that your father used to give out plane tickets, or the way that you give out plane tickets as a father at the airport. You take them, the boarding passes. You do not give them to anybody. You put them in your satchel or wherever. And as your kids are coming up to get on the airplane, you're standing there like, here you go, here you go, here you go. And you give them the ticket half a second before they need to hand it to the flight attendant. Because you know kids, they lose things. That's how God helps us. He helps us exactly the moment that we need His help. He helps us exactly the moment that we need it. God helps us. He doesn't let us run on. He doesn't let us in on where or why or how He's going to lead us and help us. But He does. So the question quite simply is this, is what do you have to worry about? What do you have to worry about? Either you believe that God is going to provide and step in and help you and lead you when you need it, or you don't. God will be the lamp unto your feet as you're taking your step. And that's how God works. And it took me a lot of years to understand that. I always wanted to know the plan. I always wanted to know, where's this going, or what am I doing? That is not how God works. Jesus famously said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 34, He's like, don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will have its own worries. Each day has enough trouble of its own. The translation of that is you need to tackle today with today's energy and with today's strength. Tomorrow will have its own stuff that you can deal with tomorrow. Like I said, my mom's a worrier. When she flies, she can't even sleep the night before because she's worried about all these imaginary things that potentially could happen the next day. What if there's snow? What if Mount Rainier goes off? Like she has all these things, and we can't worry about imaginary problems because today has enough problems of its own. All right, I'm gonna reread the psalm because I like to read it, and it's awesome. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me." So as you may guess, our last bag is dropped. Our last bag is fear. This is the last burden that I'm going to talk about this morning as one that we carry around with us. Let's see. And that's fear. What are you afraid of? And that's a question that I think you could ask to 10 different people, and outside of the universal fears of snakes, spiders, and public speaking, you'd probably get 10 other different answers on what they are afraid of the most. But you can be afraid of almost anything, like big groups of people, or judgments, and relationships, or marriage, or kids. You name it, I think there's probably someone that's afraid of just about anything. David's words, when describing this, are some of the most beautifully chosen, I think, in the entire Bible. It says, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." That is, to me, such a vivid picture of what our fears can be like in our mind. You can see it, and you can almost feel the fear that David was talking about here. There's an interesting story of Jesus. I've always thought it was interesting, is when he was about to be taken to be crucified and he was praying in the garden. You guys may have seen this famous painting that is titled "The Agony of Jesus." And this painting to me has always been a little, I thought, incomplete. Because in Scripture, Luke says in chapter 22, verse 39, that he withdrew about a stone's throw from them, beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." And then it continues. "And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground." Mark said Jesus fell to the ground. Matthew said Jesus was sad and troubled to the point of death. This picture doesn't quite portray that to my mind. He seems too peaceful, too, I don't know, happy's not the right word, but he doesn't seem like he's in the anguish that's described in Scripture. Now, the artist just decided that was how he wanted to do it, and that's fine. But I think that it's important for us to understand that Jesus was afraid of what he knew was going to transpire. Fun fact of the day, if you're a science person, is that you can actually sweat drops of blood. And what it is doctors call it, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, hematidosis. And what basically happens is severe anxiety and fear cause chemicals to release that break down the capillaries in your sweat glands, and it releases blood into your sweat. So while this can be either argued that it's a strong metaphor, it could have been, but it could also just have been a statement of fact. Jesus could have been sweating blood because he had so much anxiety and fear over what was about to happen to him. I think this is important. This has always been, for me, the most human side of Jesus that he ever showed to us. He revealed to us that he was afraid. Now, the next question that I have for you is, where do you go when you're afraid? What do you turn to when you are afraid? Who do you take your fears to? Do you share them with a friend, a parent, maybe a counselor? Do you try to erase your fears with a drink or with food or a self-help book? Or do you just hope that they'll go away? The question I have for you is, why not God? Jesus, when he was afraid, in his moment of greatest fear, the first thing he did was pray to his Father. And I think that's a message that we can take here this morning. God was the first one to know about Jesus' fear. We need to be looking to the shepherd to protect us as well from any harm that may be causing us fear. And we need to stop looking for help, at least right away, from other sheep. I grew up skiing and snowboarding in Colorado, and I got good enough in high school and college that I could take any run that I wanted. And that included like skiing through the trees. And when I first started skiing through the trees, I was afraid. I was afraid I was going to hit a tree because, common sense and logic. And I was skiing with a friend, and he told me something that I still remember to this day as some words of wisdom. He said, you don't look at the trees. You look at the spaces between the trees, and that your mind will take you there automatically. It's like if you look at the trees as they're going by, you'll most definitely hit one. The writer of Hebrews may have been a skier because his advice was very similar. In Hebrews 12, verse 1 and 2, he said, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Now, he was going through, obviously he uses it as a run, but I want you guys to think about that valley of the shadow of death, and danger and scary things are all around you in this valley, but you keep your eyes on Jesus. You don't focus on the valley. You don't focus on the things that could go wrong. Overcoming our fears and giving up that burden of fear means looking to the shepherd to be the lamp unto your feet. He is with you, as David said. All right, I think that's all of our bags. So I want you just to picture this, again, because it's so much fun. And I'm going to go for this again. Luckily, the cast is out. I kind of wish I had the cast right now, just for a second. Just because I want you to picture it in your mind. This is like how you do groceries, right? You line them up. All right. Does this look like a fun way to travel? Does it look fun? It's not fun, I'll tell you. If you invited me right now, and there's nothing in these bags. The duffel bag has 2 pillows in it. They don't weigh much, but they're still bags. They're still heavy. If you invited me to walk on the most beautiful section of trail in Washington, say a mile, right now, and I'd probably have to say no. Like, no, I'm all right. I'd rather just not do that. Because this isn't fun. This isn't the way that we were called to travel. Because we have somebody who's going to carry all this stuff for us. He's going to carry the fear, which the sign fell off. He's going to carry the worry. He's going to carry this big bag of weariness. He's going to carry our discontent. He's going to carry our self-reliance. He's going to carry all those things for us. Everyone turn to Matthew chapter 11 in your Bible. We were never intended to carry all this stuff around with us. We were never intended to deal with being tired spiritually, emotionally, physically, worrying about tomorrow, worrying about what may come, worrying about what we're going to eat. God has called us to follow him as the shepherd. And in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, I think that sounds like a better way to travel. Don't you agree? The burden of carrying all this stuff around is that we get too tired to be effective for God. We get too tired to follow God. We're carrying too much around to rely on God. We carry too much. We're not happy. We don't have contentment with what we have. I'm calling you there this morning to put down the bags. Put down our bags. We aren't intended to carry this stuff. I want you to join me in shedding this burden off of our backs this week. Put down your fears, your worry, your weariness, our discontent, and our self-reliance, and look unto Jesus. Look between the trees and into a joyous, unburdened life that will lead you to glory. The Lord is our shepherd. That's the message this morning. He will provide you and me and anybody else with everything that they need. If you're dealing with something this morning that is burdening you, please come forward when we start the next song and allow us as a church to help unburden you. Jesus is here and he wants to take that burden from our shoulders. Our elders will be in the front to talk with you, to help you, and to help lift that burden from you this morning. If you're carrying too much this morning, please come forward as we stand and we sing.